Hello and welcome to the Huddle Breakdown. My name is Laura Bradburn and I am back from my week's sabbatical, joining James and Alan. James, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's MLB playoff time. So for those that do not follow baseball, and I'm trying to be objective about this, playoff baseball is the most nerve-wracking sport interaction I have because the games can really change throughout the full 9 innings, and there's no clock; it just has a different pace to it, and so yeah, a lot of stressful hours watching a couple of the playoff games, and lost both of them, so it sucks, but that's all right.
Who's your team?
Well, that's a long story. I don't want to get into all the gory details there, but I'm a Toronto Blue Jays fan from when I was a young child. I grew up in a weird area geographically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I adopted them as my team when I think I was 10 or 11, something like that. So yeah, they beat the stinking Yankees though, at least. That's all, even if they end up losing, they're playing the Seattle Mariners right now. They're down 2-0 in a best of 7. And but they beat the Yankees, which that makes the whole season worth it because I hate the Yankees.
Yeah, the only people who like the Yankees are Yankees fans, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, everyone else hates them. It's universal. Yep.
Yeah. Alan, how are you doing?
Okay, I mean, what the hell, James? It's a summer sport. It's middle of bloody October. They should be done already.
No,
it's like the cricket season here, by the first week in September, done. Finished.
Yeah,
all the pitches are turned into football pitches. Bugger off.
can bleed into the very beginning of November, the World Series. So yeah, I agree with you. They should shorten it up, but
too much.
Yep.
Too much.
Listen, the Blue Jays do have a roof on their stadium that they can use.
Correct. That's correct.
Although I don't know if they do use it during actual matches, but
depends on the weather. But yeah, first game they were home the first 2 games. The first game they had it closed Sunday night, and last night they had it open. So the weather was nice enough. But yep, not too optimistic on the remainder of the series, unfortunately. But
yeah, well, you can report on your Toronto Blue Jays based podcast that I know that you definitely have.
Yeah, right.
Right, we've got plenty to cover this week. We're going to look at obviously the upcoming game against Dundee, and the return of Alistair Johnston to the Celtic lineup and what that might mean for selection for that game. We'll be looking a little bit at Hearts and whether they can sustain their current apparent title charge. But first things first, and Alan, I'll come to you first. The Rangers have not had a very good week this week, as to be said. What was your thoughts on their initial excitement around the return of the amazing Steven Gerrard, Mr. 1 out of 9 trophies, that then suddenly collapsed?
Well, we don't know how serious that was. It seemed like they were kind of all in, and it got to a pretty advanced stage. We don't really know why that collapsed. But really, the interesting thing for me is, what does that tell us about the intentions of the new owners in terms of their consistency of how they're approaching this project? And, they set off with Russell Martin on the basis that they had a plan, and the plan was that to win the league in Scotland, or at least compete at the top level, you need to have a team that plays possession-based attacking football. And then they got a coach in that fitted a template. They seem to want to not go down the road of having a big name and all that goes with that. They put in place a structure that was essentially a sort of head of football, Kevin Thelwell, and a head coach model, which is perfectly common around most of Europe, to be honest. Maybe not as common in Scotland, but not hardly unique. And obviously, Martin didn't work out. Whether he would have done in time, we don't know. He was to a loser from day one because of the wrath of the mob was against him. He had no credit in the bank at all. So does the pursuit of Steve Gerrard suggest a turning point in terms of the approach? Possibly. the fan base seemed to be both the fan base, the actual match going fans, and the fans in the media seem to be completely united around this notion that they must have some kind of figurehead, some kind of Mussolini or Trumpian Putin type, all-encompassing leader that will and that's very much a cultural thing, right? That is a culture. It's a cultural thing. It's a fan base that wants to have a strong man tell them that everything's going to be all right, and to be going into bat for them whenever they misbehave and all that sort of stuff. They want this leader, this as I say, this figurehead, if you like, is the word that keeps being used, which seems to be completely at odds with how the new ownership group want to run things. And so that what is fascinating is, will they blink as an ownership group and will they go down a different path? It seemed like they were wavering if they were considering hiring Gerrard, but the fact that Gerrard couldn't reach agreement with them maybe suggests that the breaking point was that he would have had to have operated effectively reporting to Thelwell and operating as a head coach, which, as we all know, Stephen Gerrard is never I don't think barely been a coach, never mind a head coach. And to be fair to him, he's been pretty open about the fact that he relies on having people in the dressing room, people on the coaching staff who can do all those things while he does his Stevie G magic stuff. So fair enough that didn't work out, which is a shame, I think, for Celtic's point of view. It would have been a case of the fact that the ownership group blinked and therefore their strategy's completely down the toilet, and B, they got Stephen Gerrard without, probably, I'm guessing, they're not going to be throwing a lot more money at this until they bring some in. And therefore, Stephen Gerrard, without money to spend and without his own players, without a support network of people that he trusts around him, I do wonder how effective he would have been. But now that's gone by, we seem to be circling around names like Danny Roll, who seems very consistent with their original vision of how they would see a head coach operating. It's also, I think, quite a brave move if they go down that road, because Roll's an incredibly well-regarded coach. I mean, he's been a coach with the German national team, with Bayern Munich. He was schooled in coaching at RB Leipzig. So it's not quite Michael Beale vibes in the sense that he's got a very credible background as a coach. But as a manager, he's had to deal with the absolute basket case that is Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, I can't emphasize enough what a terrible situation that is. If you're a Sheffield Wednesday fan, I mean, it's a really bad situation because they've got this owner who's basically given it a go. It's the old story. We've seen it dozens of times before. Somebody comes in, they think they know everything, they throw money at it, it doesn't work, and then they suddenly don't feel like putting any more money in, and they can't get rid of him because he wants to recoup some of his money, and in the meantime he won't put any money in. It's a story as old as time in the badly regulated football industry in this country. So he was able to navigate that in a situation where he wasn't able to really get hardly any players in, and players weren't getting paid, and staff weren't getting paid, and all the sort of nonsense that was going on, and actually put incredible performances on the pitch. So he'd be an interesting one, but it is very much a case of getting a young coach on the way up potentially, and it's a risk. And again, the fans are already decided they don't want him, so he would have, again, like Martin, almost no credit from day one. So the first draw, never mind the first defeat, would be met by, Mob rule again. So, or it now seems that today's favourite is Kevin Muscat, who I think would be, I think somebody more that Celtic should be concerned about, because he's somebody who, with a track record of winning, very sort of Ange type background of playing, attacking, pressing, fast football, quite risky football, but he's managed in a number of countries and been successful in a number of countries. So you can't, that's a good grounding. Whether it would be successful or not, we don't know. Ange had one go in Greece. Muscat had one go in Belgium, and both failed spectacularly and quickly, and then went away and found success again in another country. So that's one that I think would be to me a very sensible option. Would probably be consistent with their vision, and would be somebody who would be looking to break into Europe and seeing that as a progression and as a stepping stone. But outside of that, I don't know who else they really would be credibly looking at. But I think Muscat would definitely be a concern if you're a Celtic fan, I would say.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, James, that Alan brings up, that the appointment of Russell Martin was obviously an intentional one from the Rangers board to try and bring in a certain brand of football, not necessarily one that has previously been associated with Rangers or that the Rangers supporters themselves particularly wanted. It's going to be interesting to see what choice they make in terms of next manager, whether they immediately pivot away from that because it didn't work with Russell Martin, or whether they think he specifically was the issue and that actually someone else with the right characteristics could still implement that. Where do you think they'll go? Do you think they'll try and adopt a completely different style with a completely different candidate, or just say it was a case of wrong man, wrong place, and try and sort of switch like for like?
Obviously, guessing and trying to read the tea leaves, I think that my sense was that, well, let me back up for a second. So I interviewed Ted Knutson, former owner of StatsBomb, that was in our interview series that's available to our subscribers on Huddle Breakdown. And Ted summarized, I specifically queried him about the 49ers group, Leeds, and subsequently then we talked about Bloom and Brighton, et cetera. And so basically he characterized the 49ers group as having made clear mistakes, but then being relatively quick to adjust and to learn from them. And it looks to me like they clearly made a mistake with Russell Martin. My guess is that was a Thelwell hire, not a board hire. I mean, if you look at their organizational structure, the whole model, that's supposed to be the director of football's job. I find it notable that the public reporting around the meetings with Gerrard included Kavanaugh and Marath, the vice chairman who's from 49ers group that's also with Leeds, seems like directly involved. If I'm Thelwell, it probably doesn't make me feel great about my job security long term. And given how this has been a mess over the first few months of the new regime's tenure, and just the tone deafness of hiring your son in the middle of this, I mean, you just get to the point where, again, if you're not a complete idiot who's employing these people, you're like, what the F are you doing? So not only the nepotism, the brazen nepotism, but the timing of doing it. Just anyway, so I suspect that they are in the process of learning. Alan and I talked about it a lot, that they were similar to Redbird Capital when they went into AC Milan and didn't realize that they had, an ultra group that was basically Cosa Nostra, and that the implications of that in running a football club might be material to how things are going to work. So there are certain cultural sensitivities that the new ownership group may not have fully appreciated, that they are learning about. So that's why I think Muscat does make the most sense across the board, meaning that if you kind of have the framework that these guys aren't complete morons, and when I say guys, the Marath and Kavanaugh level guys, that they'll have learned from this experience. And to me, that's what makes Muscat the obvious choice if they can get him. And that's the latest reporting when we went to recording, is that they're trying to figure out maybe how to bridge that with maybe a Neil McCann interim till Muscat's done with the Chinese season towards the end of November. So yeah, I think the flip side of that is we never saw, we talked about Russell Martin being kind of Ange adjacent in his style of play. That never manifested on the pitch. And any kind of, including against Celtic, went off the rails then. He seemed to crumble under the pressure. Again, from a human perspective, understandably, given the cauldron that he was trying to live his life in. So he didn't really stick with the game plan, and he didn't seem to really implement it very well. And obviously, as outsiders, we have no idea what the attribution on that was between player buy-in, his coaching, staff's coaching. But I think it's clearly obvious. I've said, to people that I've conversed with, looking at the disparity in Motherwell playing in a very positional, style of play where players are supposed to move in certain ways, and it looked orchestrated and like, holy crap, these guys are like well coached. You didn't get any of that watching Rangers play, except for in like little flashes. So I agree with Al. Like I suspect Muscat would bring that. He'd also be close enough to the next window that if somebody like Raskin's going to get sold, which I suspect he will be, to get more players in that are going to play the system and buy in. So that would all make sense to me. And given the players involved, the big variable to me is how long Mr. Thelwell is in a job.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I never thought of. It will be interesting to see how long he remains. Alan, the last point I wanted to make on the whole Rangers debacle was, before we move on to other topics, is Russell Martin did something almost impossible. He nearly made me feel sorry for a Rangers manager. I mean, the stuff he had to put up with, as bad as they were, and as kind of resistant as he was to any kind of opposition from the fans, I mean, to leave with a police escort in the manner that he did after that last match against Falkirk, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, really. Were you surprised by just the absolute vitriol that he faced, and the fact that, even considering the group of people we're talking about, it was pretty extreme?
I'm surprised that the We Are the People Brigade acted like a vile mob. No. It's pretty disgusting. It's not surprising. It's football, right? And whatever you might think, the glow of new ownership, they're trying to do something which logically is worth a go. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the football was great. It clearly wasn't. I mean, they looked dreadful and didn't get any better. But how much of that was the kind of growing pressure that the fans put on? How much of it was that the players were also responding to it, and how much of it was poor recruitment by Thelwell and co? Because the big unknown here is, on the one hand, the Ibrox customer base will tell you that these are all fantastic players that just need to be unleashed by a coherent manager. I'm kind of swithering on that one. I'm not sure. I think there's one or two that look quite good and a few that maybe don't. But we'll see. But yeah, it was disgusting really from the beginning. But this is all more echoes though from 2012, because if you believe that you are the same Rangers that won 9 in a row in the 90s, and the team of half the Dutch national team, and George Alberts and Kloss and Gascoigne and Lauder, if you believe it's that Rangers, then you're going to have your expectations set at a certain level. And because that reality has never been properly challenged and set, then the expectation levels remain incredibly high. To sack a manager like Van Bronckhorst having got to a UEFA, for a Scottish team to get to UEFA Cup finals is a great achievement. And but again, expectations. So that's going to be a problem for anyone that is a manager of that club, is that the expectations is just so out of step with the realities of the world, and that will continue, I think, to haunt them. And then the second thing is just implementing change is difficult. Now, this is a very bad analogy, but it's just illustrative. I'm not trying to compare Europe's super clubs with Scottish clubs, but I'm more trying to illustrate the point that change can be very hard. So a little pop quiz for you. So I would, the first super club of the modern era, I would argue, was Abramovich taking over Chelsea. How many years was it that Abramovich ran Chelsea before they won the Champions League?
Oh, right.
Quick answer.
I want to say 9 years.
Nope. 9 years. Well done. 1-0
Yes.
to 1-0 to you. That's brilliant. And then how many years was it before Manchester City won after the Qatari takeover?
See,
that
this mixes me up because they
I'm gonna
didn't
have to take
have
your first answer.
7.
they had the other takeover and with the Mark Hughes stuff, and they were signing Robinho and all that, and then the Qatari
I'm
one.
going to take it. Go on. This is not meant to take up the whole show. Come on.
Six.
6. James.
I said 7. Yeah.
14.
14.
Took them 14 years to win the Champions League. PSG won it.
Champions League. Okay, I thought.
Yeah. Champions League.
EPL. Yeah.
So Champions League we're talking about. So in the summer there we saw one of the greatest performances ever in Champions League final. Paris Saint-Germain destroyed Internazionale. How many years since the takeover there before they won the Champions League?
Yeah, that's about 15 years or something.
James?
Yeah, I was going to say 15. Yeah.
Yeah, you're both right. So it's a draw. 15 years, right? So listen, clearly
it's like kissing your cousin, Laura.
It's a draw. You can both now kiss each other across the water. Yeah. So at the point, I'll make it a crude one. It's a crude analogy, but because I learned those facts this week, I wanted to share them and shoehorn it into the show somehow. Is that these even with the ridiculous backing that those clubs have had, whatever you might think of the sources of it, they still took an awful long time to learn how to win the trophy that they really wanted to win. So change is not easy, and especially so at a club like the Rangers, where the culture is so deeply ingrained and so important to the customer base, and they have the self-image of being this club that wins by playing physical, dominant, and by dominant I mean physically dominant style of football, and the ownership want to put in place a style of football that is more akin to kind of how Celtic play, which is not how they see themselves. I mean, the greatest ever player is John Gregg, who was a vicious thug of a player. Tells you everything you need to know about the kind of culture there in that sense, in the sort of footballing sense, never mind all the other issues. So, that is always going to be a tricky proposition. Whether the ownership are smart and kind of find a way of meeting them halfway, and maybe the guy, Kevin Muscat, is the way of doing it. I mean, Muscat played for the Rangers. Muscat is considered to be one of the most violent players that ever played the game. I mean, he was phenomenal. I don't know how many red cards he had, maybe 14, 15. They wouldn't play him in derbies against Celtic because the guy would just get sent off, so they didn't even play him. He played for Millwall, where he was where again similar culture to how they think football should be played as to Ibrox in that sense. So I'm not saying that's what he's like as a manager, but he has that kind of win at all costs mentality. So I think he would probably be a good halfway fit for them in that sense, to meet the fans' aspirations, as we can call them that. Yeah,
and Stevie G just liked headbutting DJs if they didn't play Phil Collins or whatever it was. I can't remember. Allegedly. Yeah, let's move on from them for a little bit. It's been fun, but we'll see where they get to. James, as the resident Bluemite in our team, it's only right to come to you first.
Bluminista.
Bluminista, I like that better. Yeah.
Bluminista, right. Yeah. Bloomin' whatever. But yeah, let's go to Hearts. Obviously, the only other team apart from Celtic in the league who have not suffered a defeat yet. 2 points ahead of us with 6 wins and 1 draw. There is a suspicion and growing murmurs that this might be a serious title challenge that they are mounting. What are your thoughts on that, and how seriously we need to take them as a potential challenge to us defending the title?
Well, as Alan and I always preach, we try to take the best version of the opposition as a starting point to kind of stress test. And I actually think that they have the talent to stay in a title challenge relative to this version of Celtic, meaning that, we've talked about the analog with Royal Union Saint-Gilloise and how they kind of right away were competing with pretty well functioning Club Bruges iteration in their first season, in that first campaign. Well, this is not that version of Celtic, right? This is not the Matt O'Reilly, Kyogo, Aaron Moy, fit and firing, really, really good version of Celtic. So we've been performing at a level that's well below that. And even if we take an optimist view that we're going to kind of grow into this and improve a little bit, I suspect that the gap between where we're at and where we've been to get up to that level is too far. It's too far to expect with the talent level of the current squad. So that means this version of Hearts is not competing against any kind of recent reference point of Celtic, at least since Ange's arrival. So the kind of framework I've been thinking about and conceptualizing is the race to 85. So what do teams after 7 league games in the remaining 31, what do they have to do to get to 85 points? And then what's that at, like a full season win rate? I think people will kind of conceptualize it. So for Rangers, for example, for them to get to 85 points in their remaining 31 games, they'd have to win at about a 94 point rate. So even that's not crazy. I mean, I suspect that's not going to happen. It seems unlikely, but it's also not like completely outside the realms of plausible. So that's like the remote scenario relative to Rangers. Right now, Hearts have to play at an 80-point pace to get to 85 points because of the strong start. Now, the question is, have their underlying performance levels been that good? I would argue they have not been. My analysis is that they've been badly mismanaged, which, again, some of that may be my confirmation bias. But I think if you look at guys like Kabore, who I have a good friend of mine who tracks a lot of European football, and when they signed Kabore, he's like, oh my God, it's another Bloom signing. He's going to come right in. He's like the promised David, who's become a star striker at USG. He's like another promised David, is how he was characterized to me when they signed him. He can't even get on the squad under Derek McInnes. and he just scored a hat trick in international football. And we joke about Lawrence Shanklin endlessly as he walks around, not defending all that well from the front. So I think they've had some injuries. The big midfielder that they signed has not really played yet. The right wing back or right back that they signed, Borchevich or whatever, he's been injured the whole time. So they have so much quality depth at this point that even with Derek McInnes, doing wacky stuff like playing 4-4-2 and putting Milne on the right, or when he did play Kabore, he played him as a wide right midfielder in a 4-4-2 instead of, that's like playing Promise David as your wide right midfielder. I mean, it's nutty. McAtee's been playing at right back in a 4-4-2. I mean, it's just, they have so many good players that if they were played in a role in a system that was coherent, I think they could very much win at that 80-point rate to get them to that 85. It's possible. I have not seen a lot of evidence, given that Lawrence Shanklin will not be subbed off under any circumstances, apparently. But he could pull a hamstring. He could rip a hamstring, and then all of a sudden,
what?
Well,
How?
Right. Taking a penalty.
Pulling his socks up.
Right. And he will score. That's the thing I said to some of the people that I interact with that are Hearts supporters, is he's going to score a lot of goals playing in this system, with the talent that's around him. That's not the issue. The issue is the ability for them to limit chances of opposition like USG has been able to do. That's been the secret sauce for Royal Union Saint-Gilloise, is that they've materially improved their ability to defend and limit chance creation. And there's virtually been no improvement for Hearts season over season in that regard. In fact, in open play, it's gotten worse. They've gotten better in set pieces. And I think that's a symptom of the fact that he's not setting these players up properly, given what's available to him. I don't see a lot of evidence yet that while it's possible, I don't see much evidence that suggests that he's going to do that proactively. So I think it's more so, Hearts is probably 75 to 80 point where I would guess that they would end up this season, which is still a great season, by the way. So this is, even if they improve a little bit on like their non-penalty XG difference, because they hugely overperformed during the first 7 games. They had a bunch of those late wins or pull back a draw against Motherwell, that type of thing. So and opposition keepers have been dreadful against them. We talk about that as one variance point, allowing them to score more than they probably should have been. So they
and
probably,
they haven't played us yet.
well, they played a horrific Rangers iteration. They haven't played Celtic yet. So I think, and they were probably the second team in that derby match against Hibs. I mean, it was a crappy game, but I would say, generally speaking, Hibs edged that maybe a little bit, but it was close. So yeah, I think base case for them is kind of 75 to 80. Now, having said all of that, because we've got so many problems that if certain risks that Alan and I have been chirping about since last spring continue to manifest, and we continue to be, I would argue mismanaged to a degree as far as miscasting players in unsuitable roles, and this kind of dogmatic sticking to the 4-3-3, then, we could slide, and you throw in negative variance and an aging Schmeichel who declines materially, doesn't have a good season, and isn't removed. Right. So all these things are possible and plausible scenarios. McGregor either plays really poorly or he has a long-term injury. Our depth in certain areas, i.e. wing, Tanecki rips a hamstring and we're back to having like no functional wide players in the system that the manager seems to rigidly stuck playing. So this is a base case. That's why I use 85. Like, I think 85 is a kind of okay base case. And we have to play at like an 82, 83 point pace for the remainder of the season to get there. That was the worst season under Rodgers in his first tenure in the 17-18 season. So I think we're in good position domestically. But what I don't like is that a lot of the risk is stuff that we don't control. And, if Rangers do get their act together, that's plausible, while unlikely. And if Derek McInnes somehow gets hired as Rangers manager, that would probably be our biggest risk for the season. And then Hearts went and hired, a good manager for what they're doing, their project, meaning actually playing the Jamestown signings. Then that would have me a lot more worried.
You were too polite there. You said if they hired a good manager and then qualified it for what they're doing. You could have just stopped at a good manager, I think. Alan, what's your thoughts on it in terms of the likelihood of Hearts sustaining this? We saw you were at pains to point out last season, I remember, under Jimmy Tilleen, that Aberdeen were playing well above their means in terms of, that it would all come crashing down at some point, and then inevitably did. Are Hearts in the same boat, or is there a little bit more basis to their potential for maintaining this?
I think it's more solid, but it's a very different picture to. This is why we look at underlying data, right? Because the performance tells you such a different story to the actual results. And when both Celtic, to be fair, Celtic have benefited from a lot of late goals this season, late winners, and Hearts have as well, late equalisers, late winners. Those are great and exciting, and that's why football is brilliant, low-scoring sport. You get a goal late, it changes everybody's mood, and it goes from a win to a draw to a win, and a loss to a draw, and all that. Fantastic. It's what football's all about. But in terms of repeatability of performance, if you're performing at the levels that they've showed so far, the way I'd characterize Hearts is they've got actually a badly. I mean, the fact that Derek McInnes was manager of the month and Lawrence Shankland was player of the month is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that's not. I'm not trying to slag off Hearts here, because, as I say, they've found some cracking players. If only they'd bloody well play them. And thank God they don't, right? And play them in a coherent way. They've got so much better that they can get, and you know how it goes with injuries and so forth. McInnes could fall upon a good formation and arrangement of those players in a way that is super effective, and then they're not scrambling around for last minute winners. they're winning games 2-0 comfortably and coasting and all that. That could happen, right? But at the moment, their goalkeepers are performing terribly until they brought this German guy in, and they've been getting away with it, whereas the opposition goalkeepers have been horrendous and essentially, heading the ball in for them, kind of thing. Their strikers, their actually attack is not functioning well outside of set pieces. That's the ironic thing. They really are. Their XG is really low, and miles off, champions pace. But they're being saved by set piece overperformance, or I don't know if it is overperformance. That's maybe the thing that McInnes brings to it. I'm slightly more not forgiving, but upbeat on McInnes than maybe James is, because I think he's still defensively, their numbers are pretty decent. Actually, they're not far off Celtic. Celtic's defensive performance is what's keeping us competitive this season. Our attack's fallen off massively, but it's still performing better than Hearts, even though we're finishing badly and keepers are playing excellently against Celtic. That's the big difference. Now, that's over a very small sample of games. All of those things can turn, right? And you would expect them to kind of even out over a season, maybe. They don't always. Sometimes these trends persist for a season. For Celtic, it's about becoming more coherent in attack, as we've said, and that's down to the midfield, mainly the midfield and the forward line, really, and the wing play. I don't see a solution to that. I think as I was on with Paul John Dykes on Axom on Friday, and he said Celtic are going to have to buy their way out of this in January, and I think I couldn't have put it better myself. Really, that Celtic are going to have to buy their way out of it. There's no solution in the squad that I can see that makes this a better attacking formation. I've shifted my opinion. If you remember, I wrote earlier in the season about if we shifted to this sort of 3-4-2-1 formation, you could slot round pegs and round holes all the way across the field. But I'm now sort of thinking, that's not going to happen. So there's a bit of, my own dissonance is leading me to think, okay, well, that's not going to happen. Therefore, what's the best we can make of this? And the best we can make of this is to accept that Celtic's strength at the moment is in organisation. Celtic's strength is the system. It's the style of play. It's the way that we play. And specifically out of possession, we're very effective. I know we're not out of possession very much, but when we are, we do a really good job of limiting the opposition, and we're continuing to do so. Therefore, if you fundamentally change the setup of the team and the way it sets up, you could well jeopardise the one good thing about how Celtic play. So I'm kind of thinking, well, keep the system, don't change the system, just find the optimal configuration of people within it, and that's our best chance. I'm coming round to that point of view. But I think we're going to have to more or less muddle through in the next 2.5 months before we get some recruits in terms of being a fluid attacking team. If variance changes and a few go in, and Hearts don't quite have Hearts continue not to configure their attack properly, I think we'll probably be at worst level pegging with them for the next 2.5 months, maybe even creep ahead of them. But there were a huge number of risks around this season, more so than any season since 2021 really. But outside of that season, at least Celtic are defending as a team well, and Alistair Johnston potentially returning strengthens that to some degree as well. It looks like Sarachi is a decent alternate to Tierney, so the back line should hopefully be pretty solid. I mean, Scales and Carter Vickers have probably been Celtic's two most consistent players this season. The concern is Schmeichel, but domestically at least he doesn't have to do a lot, so he's just got to be competent for those 5 or 6 moments in a game where he's got to do something. We'll see how that goes. So to answer your question, Hearts have got a lot of improving to do. I would say they're slightly overperforming, but not in a way that was unsustainable like Aberdeen. I think they can actually improve to meet their variance, if you understand what I mean. That depends a lot on the manager and using the many sort of many sort of tools that he's been given to play with and not using properly. Whereas Celtic, we've just got to hang on in there and hope that the likes of Tunetki and Inianacho, grow into their Celtic careers and start producing, magic moments. That Hatate maybe gets back to the player he was last season and starts to produce some magic moments as well. But at the moment, it's very dysfunctional as an attacking unit, and that's the biggest threat.
Yeah, we shall see how they maintain that. Obviously, there's much busier periods of the season coming up, the run up to Christmas and into New Year. The games come thick and fast, and it's about trying to maintain it through all of that. But as you say, they have some players that they're not even using yet that might come in handy. So we'll wait and see. And as you say, Derek McInnes might fall upon a good team despite himself. Let's wait and find out. James, Alan brought him up. Alistair Johnston is looking like a potential return for the game against Dundee. Nothing official from the club that is definitely going to be the case, but there have been pictures of him training on the training pitch and looking like he's very close to a return. If he was to make his comeback against Dundee at the weekend, how do you think that would affect not only the selection of the team, but how likely it is that we can put in a slightly stronger performance than maybe we have in recent weeks?
Yeah, I mean, he's a material upgrade. And again, it's probably going to take a little bit of time for him to get back into match sharpness. He's been out for quite a while. I think a lot of the speculation that we had entering the season was how the fullbacks were going to be utilized and, how attacking and aggressive the fullbacks would be as far as overlapping and getting involved in the final third. I think that has been part of the issue on the right side, above and beyond the fact that we have no natural right wingers that aren't named Yang or Forrest. So I think he'll help. And to Alan's point, he'll just make the defensive side of it even more resilient. So welcome return. I think it'll be interesting to see, because that with the dearth of wing play on the right, I think he becomes even more important is potentially that marauding fullback to get up and get some crosses in. The question then becomes to whom? Who's he crossing it to? And then hopefully his hamstrings will hold up, meaning that there are risks of recurrence. He's had a hamstring injury that sounds like it was a major one, particularly given the duration that he was out. So, that has to be managed. So hopefully that is managed and he can get to full fitness and persist for the rest of the season. Question is role and, being able to do it under those conditions. Because outside of that, to Alan's point, and Al and I have a little bit of disagreement on that because I think moving more towards something like 3-4-2-1, I think they can maintain most of the structure off ball. I don't think it's some dramatic shift. And because we're so problematic, and I wrote about this in my weekly column about the concern that I have is that our relative, and that's the key word, relative ineptitude has spread now. And that whereas last year I joked about tongue in cheek, it was the Bruges model that if that was deployed against us, we almost were left impotent and shockingly so at times where we just couldn't create anything. And now this season, while we still have that issue because of our lack of cohesion and buildup, now even in the final third against a bunkered, well-organized team like Hibs posed, for example, I worry that we're going to struggle to break those down even more so. It's always difficult. The question is, are we going to be even more problematic in that regard? And I suspect that might be the case, and unless we were to do something different in getting some of these players and roles that are more suitable for them. So that's my concern. But Johnston will be a huge assistance in that regard.
Yeah, Alan, it's always a worry, especially when you play against teams in the league who are maybe haven't had the best start and who are going to be cautious against us in any case. Do you expect Dundee, as James was saying, to make it difficult for us to break them down in any way, regardless of the shape that we choose to adopt on Sunday?
Well, yes, I certainly think they'll try. I mean, apart from one game where they went a bit mad and scored 3 goals against Livingston, they've virtually they're virtually moribund actually as an attacking force in the league. I mean, by any measure I can come up with, they are the worst team in the league so far. I can't find one that wouldn't place them there, both attacking and defensive. Their XG numbers, they're performing pretty much on them, both for and against. The touches in the box they have are almost half the next lowest team. Like they're averaging just under 12 touches in the opposition box per match, and the next lowest is like 18. They only force the opposition goalkeeper into just over one save a match, which again is by some distance the lowest in the league. And on it goes. The attacking metrics are not good, and on the other side of the coin, that they're averaging over 1.6 goals conceded a game. The reasonably high quality of shots that they're giving, and allowing the opposition into the box more than any other team as well. So I mean, they're basically at this stage, as this fairly early in the season, they are quite clearly the worst performing team in the league at both ends of the pitch. So in that sense, this should be a nice, gentle opener in theory for what is going to be a tricky run of fixtures over the next 4 or 5 games after that. Albeit it is away from home, and Dens Park is usually a relatively tricky place to go. But yeah, they're not being unlucky. They're not in a false position. I mean, Aberdeen scored 4 goals against them, for goodness sake. They hadn't scored all season. They're even this early in the season, they're sort of two expected points behind Falkirk at the bottom of the league. Even by that, if you look at expected goals kind of table, if I can put it that way, again they'd be sort of bottom of that, both on seeded and generated. So they've kind of, I think, over the last couple of years, they've lost McCowan, they've lost Cameron, two very important players to them. They've got a relatively settled side. They are again going to go with a lot of height in the team, as you might expect. They're going to be pretty direct. They have been playing a sort of Presley has been switching up the formation actually in most games. He's played a 4-4-2 in games recently, in games that maybe they thought they could have had a chance in winning, and then they've gone to more of a 5-4-1, which I suspect what we'll see at the weekend. But yeah, I mean, there's no excuses, frankly, is what I'm saying. I never want to be complacent. As James says, we always want to give the opposition the best version of themselves, as Ange used to say, but this is quite clearly the worst team in the league so far.
Yeah, I guess the other area that I wanted to focus on before we wrap things up, James, was the most problematic area of the team. I mean, there's problems all over the pitch for us at the moment, but certainly the one that seems to be causing the most issues in terms of both selection and then what players are actually doing when they are selected in that position is midfield. I guess my question to you is, like, Brendan's tried various combinations of players. Where do you think he's going to go next in terms of the selections there? Because he doesn't seem to fancy Arne Engels. That's pretty convincing. Luke McCowan he likes, but certainly not in Europe. Certainly he's a domestic-only player. Hatate is as hot and cold as he's ever been. Sometimes turning in the performances, sometimes not. And McGregor this season's turned into a little bit of a whipping boy, and to me, in a somewhat justified manner, because he really is slowing the play down a lot, and in my opinion, playing quite negatively. So where do you think he's going to go next in terms of how he selects things and how he gets that midfield 3 to play?
My guess is it'll be McGregor, Hatate, and Nygren. And in this case, I'll echo Alan. That's actually probably not a bad matchup, or it shouldn't be anyway. Dundee are not only probably the worst team by some distance so far this season, but they play relatively passively. They kind of drop into their deep block, defend their box, but they're not all that aggressive and engaging attackers when they're on the ball. They're more, they have the deepest defensive line by some margin versus other teams, and they just don't press that much. So that's a perfect game for Cal McGregor and Rio Hatate in particular. Generally speaking, those are the games where they tend to get a lot of joy. That tends to free up McGregor to make runs and get, through the lines that way, and create the overloads, that type of thing. So yeah, this is a game that we should win. In a long season, when you look at results, this is a prime candidate for a 4-0 type of result. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, obviously, but given the way they're playing, how bad they've been. Now, the one wild card is, I believe, the whirling dervish that is Simon Murray is back fit, and he's a terrific player for this level, and he just, he can create something out of nothing. They've been particularly bad on set pieces as well. That's the other thing. A team of Dundee's profile, it's like you have to at least be good on set pieces if you're going to be in a relegation fight and claw your way out of it. They've been dreadful on set pieces. So, but something drops to Simon Murray. He's the kind of guy that, and he's the kind of guy that could roll, particularly Scales, for example, and outquick him, that kind of thing, just on kind of a fluky bounce. So I think that's probably what the big risk factor is Murray. Outside of that, it should be a complete onslaught of possession and attacking third. And this again will be another a good test case for what I've talked about earlier, is that this is a game that if we're going to make some progress in breaking down a bunkered opponent, that this really should be it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Is Simon Murray your biggest worry, Alan, or is there any other area of the pitch that we need to be concerned about before Sunday?
I mean, they got another guy. I think it's Fraser Robertson. I think they've got two Robertsons. Fraser Robertson's a pretty creative player. I suppose he's taken up the mantle from McCowan and Cameron. Moving on, he's a sorry if it's Findlay or Fraser. I can't remember. And he's got good set piece delivery actually as well, and it tends to be the main creative player that they have. So he's one to look out for. But it's interesting with Celtic, interesting the narratives that are forming out of the midfield, because, as I say, I think I've tried to demonstrate through the performance data that really, McGregor and Hatate are just miles off what they were even last season, and Negron's actually made a pretty solid start, if you accept that his job is to do what he's doing, which is to break into the box and get on the end and support the striker, rather than be involved in a lot of line-breaking build-up. And he gives you a lot of the ball as well. But the way that it seems to completely unbalance the midfield, having Negron in the team, is that if he's essentially playing as a second striker, then you've got Hatate and McGregor almost solely responsible for ball progression in the middle. And as we know, as you've said, McGregor seems to be slowed down a little bit in maybe both thought and fleetness of foot, and therefore by the time he gets round to it, that his most obvious pass is sideways or back. I'm sure he doesn't want to be doing that. It might just be a natural muscle twitch response to getting older. And then, as we know, Hatate's very hot and cold, as you say, and if it's not connecting, then we're losing the ball and turning it over. And it is all down to them, because at least when you had a Moy or an O'Reilly or a Rogic, they tended to play as more traditional number 8s, whereas Negron really plays as a second striker, and that's really his strength as well. So we have kind of exposed this dependency on Hatate and McGregor in build-up, and they're probably the two, maybe outside of the wing play, they have been the two poorest performing players this season on a consistent basis. So, as James says, I think in this match, that may not be such an issue, just because if McGregor and Hatate do get time on the ball, they tend to be, they're good technical players. They tend to kind of flourish. So hopefully that will be the case.
Speaking of wing play, one player we could have done with is that young boy Doak that turned out for Scotland at the weekend. He's a fantastic looking player. Wonder what happened to him. But
he's a Taneki wannabe.
Oh, well, here's my hot take. I've not given you a hot take for a while. I texted my brother during the Motherwell game and said, hot take that I would never tweet. But my suspicion is that Tuneke is a bit of a one-trick pony and the trick isn't very good. That is the conclusion I'm coming to. But that's too early. Sorry, Alan, we've not got the 900-minute marker to fully judge him yet. So
no,
we'll
I
wait
was going
and
to
see.
say you obviously didn't read my piece from the weekend where I was not using your hot take terms. I was using non-hot take language. But basically, what I was saying was, he's elite level, ball carrying and getting into the box. And I'm going to say average. I'm going to be kind here, but Yang level at actually then finding somebody in the box or having a good quality shot. That's the
Yeah.
evidence so far, which I think is probably, a less sizzly way to say what you just said.
Yeah. And to be fair, that was the only thing that stuck out with Doak against Belarus. I was at the game at Hampden,
Yeah, it
and
was the same. Yeah.
he's very good at taking players on. He's very good at getting the ball out of certain situations or into certain situations, but then his decision making at the end of it isn't fantastic. So maybe there's some work to be done there for Tuneke and certainly for Doak, but we'll wait and see how that develops. James, no Thursday recording, but no end of the week show for Everybody Huddle Breakdown Extra Time with Martin this week. So what can subscribers expect in place of that?
We recorded the latest segment in our interview series, and that is with John Muller, who is a now former football journalist or soccer journalist, because he worked at the Athletic and the New York Times. Author of one of my favorite pieces of all time on soccer called Sky. Well, it wasn't called Skyball, but that's what came out of it when he analyzed Barnsley's insane season in the championship, playing really high, long balls, and almost got promoted doing it. So we have a great about an hour conversation with him. He is launching a new app called Footy that'll be coming out here in the coming weeks for beta testing. So for those that use FOTMob with the Opta data, it's going to be directionally that kind of app, but with more data and some more advanced metrics, that kind of thing. So something to look forward to. And really great guest. We had a lot of conversation about trends and tactics and what's going on in the industry. So he was very insightful.
That does sound interesting. I'll definitely be tuning in for that one. For anybody listening or watching, thank you very much for subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you want full access to everything that we have on Huddle Breakdown, both written and video content, you can subscribe to our Substack for a small monthly fee, and you can get access to past, present and future content that we are producing. Alan, anything you want to share in terms of recent pieces or upcoming pieces that are going to be on the Huddle Breakdown, just to try and entice people in?
I'm just thinking I'll probably do a written piece on Dundee in the style that I've tried to do for other opponents in the league so far, but just do it as I say, as an article rather than as part of the Extra Time show, so subscribers won't miss out on that particular bit of hopefully what's become the sort of regular content. Otherwise, normal cadence, hopefully.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me, guys. It's been enjoyable to be back. Thanks everybody for watching and or listening, and we will catch you all again next week.